serve in South America of industrial goods, they could no longer ship farm equipment and machinery to France because they were making tanks and guns with it. So we were able to sell stuff to them. But the pain that the various other sectors were having was high. The cotton centers made Britain back down and let all cotton shipments go uninspected to Germany, to neutral ports that might end up in Germany. The copper senators from copper producing states were on the same track and were going there as well. And the same was true for a lot of the food producers. Britain kept seizing all ships that were going to ports in Scandinavia that were not even British, or even going to Italy, because they were saying they were going to be shipped to Germany. So this pressure was mounting on Britain, but, and I'll get to the but in a minute. This battle occurred, like I said, when on the 11 a.m., January 24th, 1915, the Germans are setting out to raid the coast of Britain and some shipping areas with some battle cruisers. 3 battle cruisers, armored cruiser Blucher, and some light ships. The British intercepted them. They were able to decode their stuff. And as soon as Hipper, the admiral in charge of the Germans, saw the British coming, he turned and ran back to Germany. And for hours they ran. The British ships were somewhat faster, and Blucher was slower than the German battle cruisers. So it began to lag. The British very, very slowly made up the distance until finally the longest range ships could start to shoot. They shot, and they shot back and forth at each other. And Blucher was hurt and started to slow even more. Around the same time, one of the German ships took a damaging hit, did not slow down. And one of the British flagship took a damaging hit. It let water in, and it eventually went dead in the water. In fact, the flagship of the British force would end up being towed back to Britain. The point of this, though, is they're still going 20-some-odd knots for Germany. And the British flagship is so far behind that they start signaling flags, and the other British battlecruisers can't read them. And so they guess what it means, and they make a mistake. It's arguable even now. British are still arguing who made the mistake. And they diverted their forces to the slowing armored cruiser, and the battle cruisers kept going and went back to Germany. And they sank the armored cruiser, declared victory, and the Germans decided that they really weren't going to be able to beat the British on the surface very much, and they went to unrestricted submarine warfare just a few weeks later. Unrestricted submarine warfare ended up costing Germany all their positive possibilities with respect to American ever getting Britain to do anything. So then the United States put so much pressure on Germany, they stopped unrestricted submarine warfare, and then a couple years later, in April of 1917, they put it back in place, and within a day, the United States declares war, and we're in. But all those senators and all that pressure and all those things went away pretty much in February of 1915. It turns out after the war that one of the top admirals of the German fleet said that the actual German admiral had just given the command to re-engage the British. He wasn't going to continue to run, he was going to continue to fight. But as soon as they saw the British turned away as the flags were going up, he retracted the flags. So what if he went back and fought after all? And the answer is, if you game it out, a lot of times the Germans win that fight. Because the British battleship, battlecruiser, that's their flagship, is out of the action. They can't shoot anymore, they're too far back. The 4 remaining British battlecruisers are straggled way out, and one of the newest of the British battlecruisers has a brand new crew. They have not scored a hit all day. They kept guessing wrong whose splashes were their splashes. And so they were shooting off the wrong splashes, so they were correcting their aim, and they were never going to hit anything, probably. So it's basically one battle cruiser against, anyway, I won't go with the math, but if the Germans win that, they do not do unrestricted submarine warfare. And probably the Americans don't end up in the war. And if they don't end up in the war, the armistice probably happens in 1917 or 1918 when the Russians surrendered, like they actually historically did, ceding parts of the Ukraine and the Baltic states to Germany, and probably France and Britain say that's enough, because the United States isn't getting it. No Hitler, no World War II, no Holocaust. Something else might happen even worse, but that wouldn't have happened. That's my point of departure. I wrote an entire alternate history about it, and it's online. That's me.
Okay. I dug a little further back into history.
Did you go back to paleontology, though?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. Everybody here know about the library at Alexandria?
Yes.
Okay. Nobody knows exactly when and how that library was destroyed, but sometime by about 400 AD, the most magnificent library of ancient times, which had amazing documents there that could never be replaced, was gone. The library was gone. Why is that such a big deal? What we think of as science was invented by the Greeks and the Greek Egyptians that followed them. And they reached a very high degree of development. A few first-class works that they produced survived. Some things from Euclid, Apollonius, Archimedes. Just the beginning of the brilliant works described by the Greek historians and other scholars as having been created and lost. Ptolemy III is known to have, he was the pharaoh that succeeded Alexander the Great. That family, the Ptolemies were the family that's successors of Alexander the Great. He collected original texts of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the great Greek playwriters. Euripides, for example, we have 19 plays. He wrote 80. That alone would be, if you're a theater fan, that alone is a terrible loss. Of the other famous authors and scientists, there were similar percentages. Of the 12 works of Euclid, the famous Greek philosopher, we have 6 and have lost 6. Almost all the writings of Hipparchus, who is the father of astronomy, are lost. The astronomer Ptolemy referred to his works, but nobody since then was able to do that. Modern mathematicians say that the level of development of some areas of mathematics in Greek times was not really surpassed until the 19th century. For Archimedes, one of the greatest mechanical minds in history, we have about 10 works, lost perhaps around 20. That's a survival of a third of his works. And there was an interesting piece of equipment that was found in a Greek shipwreck, about a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. It looks like a mechanical computer. Even modern standards of mechanical ability pale beside some of this work. So basically, and it's safe to assume that the library at Alexandria had every bit of this, every bit of it. If the intercultural community of learning that existed at the Library of Alexandria could have spread outward rather than being destroyed from the outside with all of its documents, if it could have extended outward with all of its documents remaining intact, maybe the Dark Ages wouldn't have been so dark. The Renaissance could have been the next great advancement rather than the rediscovery of some small part of what had been lost from the ancient world. And who knows where we might be living today.
What year was this?
It was somewhere between, Julius Caesar attacked Alexandria in about, what, 40 or 50 or 60 BC. There were pieces of the library that survived in some way or another, known to have survived over about the next 200 or 300 years, but surely by the end of the 3rd century, it is gone.
Of course, the Renaissance was another 1,100 years away.
Right, but you know why the Renaissance happened when it did. What was left of this knowledge in the East, Egypt and surrounding areas, that area became sort of a haven for a time of scholars from various parts of the world because they had access to what was left of those documents. That material all wound up in Constantinople. And when Constantinople fell, the scholars all went to Italy. And that was the beginning of the Renaissance.
Now, the materials that were in the library, if the library had survived, not destroyed,
right?
Would they remain in Alexandria?
Who knows? It may not have, but they had a much better chance of surviving somewhere, or at least a larger proportion of them surviving somewhere.
Because one interesting twist on this, I hate to use your alternative history, I'm sorry, but if Islam comes along at the same time, or they take Constantinople and they take it intact, then Islam is an
They might have destroyed it. But the
They might have inherited it, they might have built
That's
on
true.
it.
That's true. Huh, hadn't thought about that. But the interesting thing is that there was a period of time back there when the Arabic scholars and the what was left of the Greek world scholars were working together. They were the ideas were crossbreeding. Wonderful things were happening, and this began to worry some of the imams.
Well, but you know who actually was in charge in Alexandria when the library was destroyed?
It was Cleopatra.
No, it was after that. It was
In 400.
yeah,
Okay.
around 400.
Yeah, he was Christians.
The Christians got their panties in a wad because you had this repository of all this pagan knowledge, and you know that is a karma is the B word. So you know we'd had all these persecutions under the Romans for all these decades, centuries. The worm turned. The Christians are in charge.
Earn it all.
Oh, by the way, you've got this great big warehouse full of
On the other
pieces of
hand,
paper.
if they survive 300 more years, there's a darn good chance that copies would have been made and get out.
Yeah, right.
Hey, well, just yeah, when the Crusades started in around 1100, I mean, all the stuff that we thought was completely gone, all the Aristotle stuff, got rediscovered because the Arabs and the early Muslims planted that seed and let it grow. I mean, there was no, how dare you
Yeah, I don't think in those days they would
read
have
it?
destroyed.
Yeah, how dare you read that? That's not